I knew my sister disliked me, but I never understood how far she would go until she pushed a birthday gift across the table and laughed. A DNA test. Maybe this will explain why you're another man's mistake, she said, loud enough for every fork to freeze in midair. I swallowed the embarrassment, mailed the kit, and waited. Months later, our family's estate lawyer called for an urgent meeting regarding Grace Ellington. My mother turned pale. Naomi's smile disappeared. In that moment, I realized something unsettling. They already knew what I was about to discover. Most people imagine family as a soft place to land. Mine always felt more like a house with cold floors, attractive from the outside, but freezing once you stepped inside. Growing up in the Ellington home in Denver, I learned early to make myself small. I was the quiet child, the one who finished homework without reminders, the one who slipped into corners so my mother wouldn't sigh and my sister wouldn't mock me. Even then, Naomi seemed to sit at the center of everything. She had a talent for drawing attention without truly earning it. Loud laughter, dramatic stories, and the ability to turn every room into her stage. And my mother, Evelyn, applauded every performance. When Naomi earned a B on a test, she was described as well-rounded. When I brought home straight A's, Mom blinked as if she had briefly forgotten who I was before saying, "That's nice, Grace. Can you help set the table?" By the time I turned 35, I had built a life far from that house. Austin suited me. Quiet mornings, simple routines, and the kind of stability I never experienced growing up. I worked as a financial analyst, dressed in calm, neutral colors, and tried not to dwell on the dull ache that came from being the overlooked daughter. But when my father, James Ellington, passed away, the gravity of our family pulled me back. He had been the only steady presence in that house, a man of few words but quiet warmth. In small moments, a hand on my shoulder, a proud nod at my college graduation. I didn't know then that he carried a secret darker than anything I could imagine. 3 months after the funeral, Mom insisted we hold a small birthday dinner at the old house. Her voice on the phone sounded overly cheerful, almost rehearsed, as if she were repeating lines someone had given her. When I stepped through the front door, the familiar smell of lemon polish and old books greeted me. The chandelier glowed, yet the house felt emptier without Dad's quiet presence. Naomi sat at the kitchen table flipping through resort brochures, still tanned from some recent trip, barely glancing at me when I walked in. Mom poured herself more wine than usual, her hands shaking slightly. Something unspoken hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. I carefully asked about the will, trying to sound respectful. Mom froze, her smile stiff. "We're just not ready yet," she said, but her eyes flicked toward Naomi. Naomi smirked like she held a secret I didn't know. Looking back, the dinner was never meant to celebrate my birthday. It was designed to prepare the moment of my humiliation. The tension that night didn't arrive suddenly. It crept in slowly, like a draft under a closed door. Every small detail felt wrong. Naomi kept glancing at me with a look of expectation, as if she were waiting for a signal only she and my mother understood. Mom's wine glass was never empty, though she hardly drank from it. Her fingers simply circled the stem again and again, like she needed something steady to hold. Dinner itself became a performance. Naomi talked endlessly about her job, her husband, and her plans to redesign her kitchen in a French farmhouse style. Mom laughed at every remark, even the dull ones. When I spoke, the room seemed to dim, as if someone had lowered the volume of my presence. Halfway through the meal, Naomi leaned back, her eyes sharp with amusement. "So, Grace," she said sweetly, "still working at that firm in Austin?" Before I could answer, she launched into another story about herself. It wasn't really a question. It was a reminder. "You are background noise." Still, something else sat beneath her confident expression: anticipation, calculation. When Mom stood to bring out dessert, a small store-bought cake she hadn't even bothered to plate, Naomi pushed back her chair dramatically. "Actually," she said, reaching for a glossy box wrapped in silver paper, "I brought a birthday gift. Something I think you'll find enlightening." Mom's face lost all color. "Naomi," she began, but Naomi ignored her and slid the box across the table toward me as if it contained evidence rather than a present. "Go on," she said, her smile thin and sharp. "Open it." I peeled back the paper, a strange stillness settling around me. Inside was a DNA testing kit. The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Naomi leaned closer, laughing softly. Maybe this will explain why you're another man's mistake in this family. The words landed clearly and deliberately. Mom flinched. I noticed, but she said nothing. The humiliation stung, yet the fear in her eyes felt more revealing than the insult itself. Naomi hadn't simply mocked me. She had revealed something she wasn't supposed to say aloud. Later that night, in my old bedroom, the walls still painted the soft blue I had chosen at 15, I searched through old boxes like someone trying to confirm their own history. At the back of the closet, I found an envelope that didn't belong with the others. The dust around it had been disturbed recently. Inside was a photograph, a younger Evelyn holding me as a baby while standing beside a man I didn't recognize. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, were 2 words, "Forgive me." My hands trembled as I photographed everything. Then I looked again at the DNA kit Naomi had delivered like a weapon. She had wanted me to take it. She had wanted something to happen. Fine. I mailed it the next morning, not because Naomi wanted me to, but because I needed to understand what truth she was so eager to turn into a weapon. The results arrived 5 weeks later on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting at my desk in Austin, half listening to the steady hum of the office vents when a notification appeared on my phone. I expected dread. What I didn't expect was clarity, sharp, cold, and undeniable. No biological relationship detected with the Ellington family. My breath caught, but I kept reading. A suggested match appeared for the Hartman lineage, a name I had never spoken or even heard, suddenly connected to me by blood. Strangely, it didn't hurt the way I thought it would. Instead, it felt like confirmation of something I had always sensed. I had been a guest in my own childhood, never truly treated as a daughter. What unsettled me even more happened next. I sent the results to our family group chat. Nothing dramatic, just a screenshot and a simple question. Does anyone want to explain this? My phone buzzed almost immediately. Mom called, crying, not with remorse but with fear. Grace, sweetheart, please delete that. You don't understand. This is complicated. Things happened a long time ago. We moved past them. She never apologized. She never acknowledged the decades I spent feeling like a burden in her home. Instead, she asked me to bury the truth again. Naomi, however, didn't call. She sent a text. Just 4 words. Well, now you know. The message felt cold, satisfied, as if she had waited half her life for the moment I discovered I didn't belong. That night I called her, my hands shaking with questions I didn't know how to form. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice carrying clear irritation. Why, Grace? Why now? I asked. Why push this? Why humiliate me? She laughed quietly, a sound that landed like ice. Because I've carried this family secret for 20 years, because Mom owed me, because you've played the victim long enough, and now the right people will finally get what they deserve. Then she hung up. Her words lingered with me like smoke. The next morning, I began asking careful questions. I spoke with family friends, old neighbors, and people who had known my parents before Naomi and I were born. What slowly surfaced was unsettling. Naomi had been digging for months, meeting with estate lawyers, hinting about upcoming changes, speaking as though Dad's estate already belonged to her. It was clear I needed help. Real help, the kind my father would have insisted I find. So I hired an attorney, Sarah Ang, known for handling complicated inheritance disputes. I brought her everything: the DNA results, the photograph, screenshots of Naomi's messages, the strange conversations, and the fear I had heard in Mom's voice. Sarah listened carefully, her expression steady as she wrote notes, as if piecing together a puzzle. Finally, she said, "Your instincts are correct. This isn't just resentment. Someone is building a case to erase you." 3 days later, I received a call that changed everything. Mr. Dalton, our longtime estate lawyer, sounded unusually formal. "Grace, your father left instructions for a will reading under specific circumstances. Those circumstances have now been met. I believe you should prepare yourself for what you're about to hear." Prepared? I doubt anyone could have been. On the morning of the will reading, Denver felt colder than I remembered. Not just seasonal cold, but the kind that settles into your bones, the kind that feels like a warning. Sarah and I arrived early at the downtown building where Mr. Dalton's office occupied the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows and dark wood panels gave the space a formal weight, the kind of place where truths didn't hide, they echoed. We chose seats near the window, slightly out of the direct line of attention. Sarah leaned closer and whispered, "Observe everything. Speak only when necessary." Her calm steadiness eased the tightness in my chest. Mom arrived next. She looked exhausted, as if she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was pinned back hastily, and she held her purse with both hands like it was the only thing keeping her steady. She didn't greet me and didn't meet my eyes. Instead, she moved to a chair at the far end of the table and stared down at the polished surface as if it might swallow her whole. Then Naomi entered. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, each step carrying a confidence that bordered on performance. She wore an expensive cream-colored suit, perfectly tailored, and heavy makeup that made her appear sharper and harder. As expected, she brought her own attorney, a man I recognized from billboards advertising aggressive estate litigation. Naomi offered me a slow smile, one corner of her mouth lifting higher than the other. "Grace," she said, as if greeting someone unimportant, though her eyes gleamed with expectation. She clearly believed she had already won. Mr. Dalton entered last, carrying a thick folder. He moved with the deliberate calm of someone who understood the weight of what he was about to reveal. When he reached the head of the table, he rested a hand on the folder and looked at each of us in turn. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to note that James Ellington left explicit instructions regarding how this reading should proceed. He anticipated complications. Everything I am about to share was prepared with full knowledge of circumstances that some of you may find surprising." Naomi shifted slightly, her confident smile faltering. Dalton opened the folder and began reading the will. "I, James Robert Ellington, declare this my final will and testament. I leave 70% of my estate, including the family home, investment accounts, and related assets, to my daughter, Grace Ellington." Silence spread across the room instantly. Naomi jumped to her feet. "She is not his daughter," she shouted. "We have DNA proof. She has no legal." Dalton raised a hand calmly. "Please sit. There is more." Reluctantly, she did, though her jaw tightened so hard it looked painful. Dalton continued reading. "I have known since Grace was 2 years old that she is not my biological child. I chose to raise her anyway. I choose to leave her my legacy because she alone has proven worthy of it. This decision requires no further validation." Naomi's complexion drained to a dull gray. Mom closed her eyes, the strain clear on her face. But Dalton was not finished. 8 months before his death, Mr. Ellington had hired a private investigator to document any attempts to influence or interfere with his estate. The investigator collected substantial evidence. Dalton placed a stack of documents on the table: payments, withdrawals, bills, and meeting records, showing Naomi Ellington's attempts to pressure her father into changing his will, including unauthorized withdrawals totaling $50,000 during his illness. Naomi's attorney stiffened. "We were not informed." Dalton interrupted calmly. "You were not required to be." The investigation also recorded consultations with 3 estate lawyers, discussions about expected changes to the family inheritance, and the purchase of a DNA test mailed to Naomi's home address and gift-wrapped. Naomi's eyes widened. "That's ridiculous," she said, her voice unsteady. "It was a joke." Dalton then placed the final document on the table, a handwritten note in my father's unmistakable handwriting. "Mr. Ellington asked that I read this aloud." He unfolded the page. "Naomi, I know what you have been planning. I watched you try to manipulate your mother. I hoped you would choose differently. These consequences are the result of your own decisions." A strained sound escaped Naomi's throat, part gasp, part frustration. Her attorney leaned closer and whispered sharply, "Do not contest this. There is a no contest clause. You will lose everything." But Naomi was already unraveling. "This is fraud," she snapped. "Grace manipulated him. She took advantage of a dying man." Sarah stood then, her tone quiet but firm. The will clearly acknowledges Grace's parentage and explains Mr. Ellington's reasoning. Any challenge would be considered frivolous and would trigger the no contest clause, including repayment of outstanding loans, approximately $200,000. Naomi's expression twisted. "That's not a loan. He gave me that money." "Not according to the estate records," Dalton replied evenly. Mom finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Naomi, stop." But Naomi couldn't stop. Years of entitlement, resentment, and fear collided at once. "This should be mine," she said bitterly. "All of it. I'm the real daughter. I'm the one who stayed." I stood slowly, keeping my voice steady. "You didn't stay, Naomi. You controlled. You threatened. You built your life around secrets you never earned." She turned toward me, her eyes wide with anger. "You don't deserve," Dalton gently interrupted. "There is something else your father left." He opened a smaller envelope addressed to me. Inside was a short letter. "Grace, you spent much of your life believing you were invisible. You were not. I saw your strength, your kindness, and your integrity. You were my daughter, not by blood, but by choice. I leave you my legacy with complete certainty that you will honor it." My vision blurred as I finished reading. When I looked up, Naomi finally understood the reality of the moment. This was not simply my success, it was the outcome of her own actions, carefully anticipated by the one person she had underestimated the most. The legal consequences followed faster than anyone expected. Naomi's attorney withdrew the next morning, leaving her searching for someone willing to take a case that was already collapsing. When she attempted to contest the will anyway, the judge dismissed it quickly. The no contest clause was airtight, and the evidence overwhelming. Her inheritance disappeared entirely. The $200,000 she had taken from Dad was officially classified as personal debt owed back to the estate, and the $50,000 in unauthorized withdrawals was added to that total. She was given 1 year to repay it or face additional legal action. For the first time in my life, Naomi appeared small, not humbled, simply trapped by consequences she had always managed to avoid. A week later, Mom came to visit me in Austin. She sat on the couch in my apartment, hands folded tightly, her eyes red from exhaustion. She told me everything. The truth about my biological father, the arrangement made decades earlier, and the guilt she had carried but never addressed. I listened, but I didn't reach for her. Some wounds require distance rather than closeness. "I want to make things right," she whispered. "I believe you," I replied, "but making things right begins with allowing me to live without carrying your secrets." In the months that followed, I stepped away from Denver entirely. With Sarah's help, I managed the estate, settled the accounts, and carefully chose the direction of my life. It was the first time I made decisions without worrying about who might be disappointed. I eventually left Denver behind and built a quieter life in Oregon, where the past no longer followed me. Some endings are not dramatic. Sometimes they are simply the decision to choose peace instead of pain. And if you have ever been the overlooked one, remember this: you deserve better than the people who failed to recognize your value. Share your story below and subscribe for the next one.